Remains anyone's guess how the structure of the government will look like as political parties continue to tussle over who gets included in the Government of National Unity. Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and Law Professor at the University of Stellenbosch, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, is among those who've been keenly commenting on the GNU. She now joins us live for further discussions. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us on this Sunday morning. So we just got out of the conversation with the Deputy President of the EFF, the fourth biggest party in Parliament. Are there any takeaways for you on what the EFF is proposing, that if there is a government of national unity that is set up, it must exclude the Freedom Front Plus as well as the Democratic Alliance?
Greetings, Aldrin, and to the viewers. Thank you for the privilege. I get the EFF, but it really is the same mentality that the DA started with, where you say, if I'm in, so-and-so should not be in. We now have to accept that the people of South Africa did not give any party the mandate to govern. And that has thrown the country into a situation of forced collaboration within the executive. Of course, in Parliament, there's always been collaboration because all of these parties have been represented in Parliament and they will be represented in Parliament. But the collaboration is primarily in the executive. And to exclude anyone will not help us. What I would say, though, is anybody who wants to be part of the Government of National Unity, GNU, should have been made to sign a statement of acceptance of all provisions of the Constitution. Because if the Freedom Front Plus, for example, rejects Section 9.2, which says special measures may be adopted to advance persons who were disadvantaged unfairly in the past, then you would not want to put it in the executive. And the same thing applies with the DA. Everyone who goes to the executive must accept the Constitution 100%.
Well, the EFF in their letter also speak about, they say that the EFF is committed to the rule of laws, the supremacy of the Constitution, anti-corruption, accountability and transparency. So there is that we accept that the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. However, though, does making arguments, for instance, let's say, for instance, around the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, does that really render a political party anti-constitutionalist? And I think the same argument applies to the Freedom Front Plus as well.
No, certainly not. I understand the EFF to be prepared to operate under this Constitution whilst pushing for a constitutional amendment. That was how I read its manifesto. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm asking people is, whilst you are in the executive, you're not there to implement your own policies. You're there to implement the laws that exist. So if you don't like the laws that exist, you should not be in the executive.
Yeah. Then the proposal also from the Democratic Alliance, speaking about sealed mandates. Are those really constitutional to say that we're going to have a ministry that has a deputy minister that comes from one political party as well as the DG that would have been coming from one political party? I don't know in terms of the law how they'll be able to navigate that, considering the appointment of the DG is different to that of a deployee, a political deployee to a position of minister or deputy minister. But is a sealed mandate constitutional?
No, it's not. But also there's duplicity there. If we're saying politicians should not influence the appointment of DGs, if we're saying DGs should not be attuned to any political party's way of life, but be faithful to the Constitution and existing laws, then there is no reason why the current DGs should not function. But in any event, it would be illegal to remove the current DGs with or without a sealed mandate, it would be illegal, and I would expect Labour to tackle that. And even if it means Labour goes on strike for that, because we cannot have that. I mean, political parties have said we shouldn't do what Americans do, and they've said that's cadre deployment. So it can't be when they're now coming into power, they want to do it. In America, it's standard practice that when a new government comes in, the top of the civil service resigns.
Yeah.
And they sit there temporarily until somebody else is appointed. And if somebody likes them, they would be appointed. But people have argued that they don't want that in South Africa. And in any event, our law does not allow that in South Africa.
Yeah, and I wonder also the other thing about it, Prof, is that so you have the proposal that is made by the Democratic Alliance and some other political parties arguing, and even some pundits, that how would the president be able to exercise his power as the head of cabinet, as the chairperson of cabinet, because currently that the executive power resides in the president. And when a mandate is issued and cabinet communicates, that cabinet means that every member of cabinet is also co-signature to that particular agreement that goes out publicly.
Absolutely. And I think that's another misunderstanding. No minister governs in his or her own right. Every minister is exercising delegated authority from the president, and all executive authority is accorded by the Constitution to the president. So going forward, this is what's going to happen. Every minister who comes into power will have to pursue the existing policies and the existing legislation. But should they want to change policies, they would then have to prepare a cabinet memo or a white paper or whatever instrument and send it to cabinet for it to be approved. The last time I saw this agreement, it required sufficient consensus, which is measured with 60%. What does this mean? It means it doesn't matter which party is governing. If it's going to change existing policy, it will require 60% agreement. And I don't see the ANC agreeing to anything that is regressive.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty, right, Prof? Because some people actually see it as that the ANC might actually bow down to the pressure that would come from, because speaking politically as well, I'm speaking now to Floyd Shivambu about the proposal that they are making, that as part of their proposal, they give the assurance and guarantee that that we shall never work with the DA in any sphere of government to remove the ANC from power where it is elected as a leader of the executive or legislature. He says that this doesn't have to do with wrongdoing. They won't be removing the executive because of nefarious reasons. And I don't know how do you test that particular element around whether it is legitimate what is being put forward, for instance, in a motion of no confidence, or whether it is seen as being nefarious?
Well, I think the EFF needs to think carefully. 22% of the people of South Africa, or nearly 22% of the people of South Africa voted for the DA. And nearly 10% of the people of South Africa voted for the EFF, and of course 40% for the ANC. Politicians should not try to exclude any community other than for reasons to do with illegality. And of course, if a party chooses not to respect the Constitution, chooses to not to respect the rule of law, chooses to attack the judges, you would not want to put it in the executive because it would interfere with the rule of law. So I would say to the EFF, they should rethink. They are not wanting the DA or the Freedom Front Plus to be included in the executive. At the end of the day, it's just about, do you respect the law? Do you respect transformative constitutionalism? Because for me, the biggest divide here is everyone who is going to the executive committed to transformative constitutionalism, and that their responsibility, therefore, is transformative governance. And if they're not prepared to engage in transformative governance, we as civil society will be at their door every day for the next 5 years.
Then there's also this other, what seems to be is going to happen, as the ANC chairperson we had spoken to him before, Panyaza Lesufi, and that is the agreement that's signed at a national level has an impact on what happens at a provincial level, where there is a hung provincial legislature, but also cascading down all the way to the local government as well. Perhaps maybe, Prof, you can speak to us about, is it possible at all to insulate the certain levels of government from what happens at a national level to ensure that service delivery continues and we don't face instability like we've seen in the hung municipalities?
Well, certainly. I do think at provincial level it's inevitable that the agreements reached at national should be engaged with provincial leadership and make sure that the arrangements at national are synergistic with the arrangements at provincial level. But local government, I don't think the leadership should change there. However, in terms of transformative governance, local government has to be impacted to make sure that all of these manifesto things that are about making sure that South Africa is put first, and which includes the funding of civil society, cascades to local government, building an industrialist economy. That should happen at local government as well, tackling the cost of living, investing in people, which includes land. Local government will have to come to the play. Defending democracy will have to happen at local level as well, because that includes fighting corruption and of course, a better world and a better Africa. Local governments, as it stands, have an opportunity to enter into international agreements. They too have to do so in ways that are attuned to the marching orders from national.
Does that not amount to undermining the will of the people? Because the local government councils and the councillors that were elected there were elected during a local government election, and that is what the electorate wanted at the time at a local government level. So why is it that what happens at a national level should also influence what happens at a local government level where I voted for a certain particular political party?
No, Aldrin, I'm with you here. I said it would be wrong to change leadership at local government level. And I said the agreement at national should cascade to provincial. But at level of policy and at level of renewing the way South Africa is governed, to make sure there's no corruption, to make sure we put people first, to make sure that there's transformation that addresses the imbalances of the past, that should cascade to local government. For example, Floyd spoke about how in the Western Cape, on the one hand, the nation thinks it's best governed. But if you're living in Kayamandi, if you're living in Manenberg, living in Khayelitsha, etc., your life is different. So the national policies have to cascade to local government. It doesn't matter whether you're in Western Cape or in KwaZulu-Natal, to make sure that people's lives are improved and that no arm of government considers itself above the transformative intent of the Constitution and the requirements of integrity.
Prof, let me quickly ask you this. The state of capture report that led to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry made findings certain individuals, prima facie cases were leveled, or allegations were leveled against them, the likes of Azizu Kotwa. He's been sworn in Parliament this week. What do you make of that as a custodian of the report, the initial report, and then later on those people that have been identified as wrongdoers, but of course further investigations being done by the police, are now also representing us, the people?
Yeah, those are questions around the ANC's own internal policies around should people be in Parliament if they're being prosecuted. But I must indicate that Mr. Kodo was not implicated in the state capture investigation that was ordered by myself and accepted by a court of law. what happened was that when President Zuma established the State Capture Commission, he gave it additional powers to deal with other forms of corruption. So I don't believe that, for example, Mr. Kodwa is charged with state capture. State capture is when you have a shadow government that is remotely controlling what happens in state affairs. And people in state affairs are merely pawns, in that people are placed in positions to pursue agendas for a private elite outside of the system. And when they don't pursue those agendas, they're removed. And this is how the Minister of Finance was removed in December 2015. And then when this matter was investigated, it became clear that it's a whole spider web that is controlled by two families, and people are appointed or removed based on their willingness to pursue the private interests of those two families.
Yeah, but the State Capture Commission of Inquiry's finding, even though it was opened up a bit, still makes reference to the finding against Minister Zizikotwa, former minister now, Zizikotwa.
Yes, that's why I said I do accept that there was that he was implicated, and the State Capture Commission suggested that those people who were considered implicated should be further investigated and possibly charged. And he has been charged. So it's now a matter of the party concerned, what is its own internal policy regarding who it sends to Parliament. And you are right that all of these political parties have said that they stand for integrity. And the former governing party, which could be a minority government right now if it chose to be, has said it's going through a renewal process. And it's up to it then to ask its questions. Are we sending people to Parliament based on our commitment to a renewed organization? And when I was looking at its party manifesto, priority number 5 in Defend Democracy is about sending honest, dedicated, and capable leaders to the state.
Thank you so much for your time, Prof. That was a Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and Law Professor at the University of Stellenbosch, Thuli Madonsela. I truly appreciate your time.